This is at Desert Live, and this and every Saturday this time, we have conversations about culture, about mission, about Christian living, and more. And as sometimes we do, I have been on the road for some of these conversations. And today, I am actually sitting at ACA, the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics, in their new offices here. And I'm going to introduce my guest in just a minute, but I am in Oxford in the UK. I'll be here for the next week teaching a class that I teach with Wycliffe Hall and with Talbot School of Theology students. So we're excited to be here as well. So you may have heard of ACA. And so when I'm here, I wanted to get Charlie Stiles. Charlie Stiles is the executive director of ACA, the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics. ACA provides evangelist apologists for workplaces, educational contexts, and local churches. Charlie is an ordained Anglican minister. You know, I didn't know that till I read the bio. I just know you as an apologist. So, having previously studied theology at Durham University and trained for ministry at Oak Hill Theological College. Charlie, I would say welcome, but thank you for welcoming me here into these new facilities.
Well, welcome to a very wet and miserable Oxford.
It is terrible.
As I said as I greeted you today, this is why Brits always talk about the weather.
Oh, gosh.
You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, I came up, I literally landed at noon, 12:30, and it's 7 o'clock. You know, it's 5 o'clock here. And it took like 2.5 hours to get up here because of all the weather and the things blown over. So welcome to sunny England. I come here every December and every May, and I teach this class. You know, the Wycliffe requires, the Church of England requires Anglican ordinands to take evangelism. So this
should.
is,
I mean, isn't
as
that
well
great
it should.
news?
We love that. And so this is Wycliffe's expression of it. So I teach that, bring my Talbot students along. And then I come back in May, and I teach understanding Christianity and culture and theology of mission. And my wife says, I'll go with you in May, but I'm not going in December.
Not December.
But the Christmas stuff, didn't you guys just have snow?
Oh, we did. It was beautiful.
It was beautiful.
I
I
live
saw
out in the
pictures.
countryside in the hills of the Cotswolds, and it was just, you look at it and you think, so yeah, we took our Christmas card photo and everything.
That's so good. It's the perfect time. I saw some pictures of from Yarnton Manor here where our friends are. And okay, all right. So let's jump into our conversation. Let me remind everybody that we're going to take your calls, and we're talking about apologetics. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on is that you're sort of the future if current trends continue. Now, the decline of religion in America has been going on for decades. It's actually slowed, or you might say stopped in some ways, but it's very confusing right now in American religion. For example, for the first time in the history of America, Gen Z, more men than women involved in church. And a lot of that has to do with a large number of dropouts who are women, young men, the crisis of young men. Depending upon your ethnicity, your church has come back sometimes strong from COVID, others have not. But for example, I was just with some African American leaders yesterday in Denver. African American community churches haven't come back as strong. Yet I talked to others saying we're having revival at our church. It's a very mixed reality. But you're in a more secularized environment as well. So let's just start with the apologetics question. Because you're more secular, we're less secular, but getting more and more secular. Is apologetics essential at every level of culture, or does the growing secularity call for a greater engagement of apologetics?
Thanks so much for the question. I think that is very much some of the thinking that we're trying to do here at OCA, is to say, what's going on big picture? I mean, you're a missiologist, and trying to understand some of the cultural trends and the needs, and then think about how do we come alongside the local church in this country, in other parts of the world. And we look actually over to mainland Europe, and we realize in mainland Europe, they're even further in this secular direction. I think I would say that the questions shift, and they shift with every generation, but I think now we just cannot assume that people know anything about Christianity. So they're not being brought up sort of singing hymns or knowing Bible stories in a way that you go back a couple of generations, and you could almost default that if somebody was an atheist, they were a Christian atheist, or if they were an agnostic, they were not really sure about the Christian God, but they still knew something of the stories. And genuinely, I had a conversation with somebody about, 9-10 days ago, and they said, "What, you mean Jesus was a real person?" And we just talk about Christmas and about the carols, you'd think, 2,000 years people have been singing these songs about him. So I think the apologetic edge, that edge that says, how can we be ready to give an answer, to explain the reason? It's always necessary. If anything, it's more urgent when people don't have these assumptions. But the way that the questions present themselves has definitely changed.
And it's interesting, like people don't even know that Jesus was a living person. Right. But I was on the plane, just flying over here hours ago, And the people next to me were talking about a news story, and I just pulled it up. A sarcophagus found at Church of St. Nicholas could be the tomb of Santa Claus. And what they said was, wait, he's not dead. He's alive. And, they were smiling and all sorts of stuff. But I realized that for them, in a secular European context, Santa Claus and Jesus might as well be two mythical creatures. I mean, they're
the stories we tell at this time, that we tell to children at this time of year.
Yeah,
And we've got songs. Santa Claus is coming to town and a little town of Bethlehem.
Now, when I think of apologetics, probably the first person I ever read was Josh McDowell, Evidence That Demands a Verdict. And it's interesting because now Sean McDowell is his son and an apologist in his own right. I mean, a globally known apologist on our faculty there at Talbot. But we talk sometimes about how the whole conversation has changed so much from his dad's generation to today. In some ways, it's not, is it true? Does the Shroud of Turin point to that, or does archaeology point to that? It's sometimes, is it good? And so, I mean, what is, as you look at apologetics, don't take my framing of that being necessarily the right answer. What's going on in apologetics today? How has it changed the last few years?
Well, I think we are seeing that the apologetics needs to respond to the way that culture is going, because apologetics is, and the way I describe apologetics, my working definition is it is evangelism in dialogue with people's questions, concerns, and desires. And so you're trying to explain the gospel message, the evangel, but in a way that connects with where people are at. And then, therefore, if people move, apologetics needs to move. The gospel doesn't move, but that connection journey does. And so I think the question of is it true absolutely still matters. And people talk about being in a post-truth culture and things like that. And I think a lot of that is overstated. But I think that before people even begin asking the question, is something true, or is does the evidence worthy of consideration, let alone does it demand a verdict, they are saying, what difference does this make? Mm-hmm. What is the impact this has? And one of those would be, is it good? Right. Is religion good for the world? Is the church a force for good? And so one of the most watched debates in recent times on YouTube in this country was a big one about the Catholic Church, particularly. You had Stephen Fry against, and Anne Widdecombe, quite a well-known politician, in favour of the motion, and others. And so they were talking about the particular Catholic Church and is it a force for good? Because people have seen scandals. People have worried. There's this real concern and lack of trust in any institutions, whether that be the government or the BBC or the church. And so people are saying, okay, before I even consider if this is actually true, is it even something I want to engage with? Has it got any sort of appeal? The positive side of that, however, for me, is I think that apologetics used to be how do you give a defence? Assuming almost that Christians are on the back foot and people are coming at us with questions or concerns, going, how can you believe that? How can you believe that? I find that now people just don't even know. Mm-hmm. So the apologetic is actually, they're going around going, I'm trying to figure out life. Have you got any ideas? And you can say to your hairdresser, actually, yeah, for me, I find my Christian faith is really significant. And they go, oh, yeah, I didn't know about that. And the conversation, at least even in the sort of 25 years since I was at university, has completely changed from something that was quite aggressive, where Christians were on the back foot. People had these arguments.
We don't use the phrase "on the back foot."
Oh, sorry.
So
okay.
That means you're kind of leaning back. You're
imagine a boxer.
Forward. You've lost your momentum.
A boxer has been, it's all kind of on the ropes almost, and you're kind of back there thinking, how on earth do I fend
we're
this
two nations divided by a common language.
We are indeed.
So, okay.
We've got a few North Americans on our team, and we do have to have translations.
It's like, what does that mean? But so no, I think this is so helpful though, because I think that. A lot of times Christians in America, now, we're on return stations but across all in America. I mean, people listen around the world because they have the app, but we're overwhelmingly an American audience, is that it's not in that sense the same way in maybe the American South. It might be that way in Vermont. So a lot of times we're trying to figure out, how do I represent Jesus and his kingdom well? And I think increasingly apologetics is a part of that, because people... the plausibility of the Christian faith is under attack, and we get for multiple reasons. Here, you're almost pre-Christian, it feels like.
So that's some of the language that people have started using. So you go from Christian to post-Christian, and then because the things that you're debating or discussing, you're actually doing it in the face of Christian assumptions, even if someone isn't a believer, and then you get to what's the next stage when that cultural memory fades, and so it is almost like you're back pre-Christian. I think it's helpful. I think it's a helpful way of thinking about things. But it's almost thinking more like it's an unreached people group. So you think about the cross-cultural training you would need to do if you're going to go to a group where there's not a common language, there aren't common traditions, there's not a common kind of cultural, there aren't common cultural assumptions or rituals, and you're thinking, how can I relate the Christian gospel to what's going on there? But it does mean, I think, that it's an unploughed field, so the opportunity is huge. Whereas I think in a post-Christian culture, actually, it's all there's rocks and there's objections and there's weeds. Actually, there's a whole bunch of people going, we just didn't know that. And so the number of times that me or one of the team will have a conversation and people just say, I just never knew.
Wow.
And that's where I think whether it is even the traditional kind of evidence that demands a verdict, which was groundbreaking at its time, that there still is absolutely space for that. But I find normally that it's the second or third conversation when you've explained the difference it makes to me. And so therefore, when somebody says, what is apologetics? Well, it's everything from you just explaining how you do life. What does it look like to actually live as a Christian? Mm-hmm. People are really interested. How do Hindus live? How do Muslims live? Some say, okay, I don't come from either of those kind of backgrounds. I don't necessarily believe that. What's your option? And you go, well, actually, this is what it looks like for me. And so that question, like, why are you a Christian, is really what apologetics is about. And one of the whys is because the evidence is there, but another why is because God is with me, or because he's done this in my life, or when I was actually at the graveside of burying my own child, God was with me.
Wow.
And that's a really powerful apologetic. It's a reason for the hope that we have.
Love that biblical reference. We're going to continue our conversation with Charlie Stiles. We're actually right here at ACA, the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics. If you go to edstetzerlive.com, the links for, Charlie's information, but also ACA is listed there as well. We're going to take your calls also. We're talking about apologetics. How do we engage a secular culture? It's 877-548-3675. Again, we're here live with Charlie Stiles right here in Oxford. 877-548-3675. Stay with us as we continue our conversation. Hey, we are back. Ed Stetzer Live. I'm Ed Stetzer. I didn't introduce myself at the beginning. I'm the Dean of the Talbot School of Theology at Biola University. But this week, I'm actually teaching at Wycliffe Hall at Oxford University. And so while I'm here, got here today, it's Saturday. Well, it's Saturday where you are, it's Saturday where we are, it's just a different time of day. And so I wanted to get together with my friends at ACA. I'll be doing several things with them this week. ACA, again, is the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics. You'll find all the resources online. Lots of helpful stuff, lots of training resources. Want to commend their good work to you. Charlie Stiles leads the group here. He's our guest today, and we're talking about apologetics. What are some of the main questions people are asking today?
I think they're the same questions that are being asked all over the place in culture, but I think there are specific religious ones. But I think some of the questions are, what about justice? Mm-hmm. What do we say about race? Mm-hmm. What is the value of a human being? We have when we look, how all the websites work with the algorithms. You make a YouTube video, you see what really gets hits and engagement, and I think there are those sorts of questions about the very nature of life, of what it means to be a human, and then how do we navigate life? And so as we've been talking already, those questions are now the presenting questions that are around in culture. Is there truth? How can we actually know things? And then I think the second questions are, of course, what about science and the Bible? Or can we trust a text that's 2,000 years old and more? But they are the second questions. Mm-hmm. And so when we're talking with people, it's things like, as we do quite a lot with young people, and we do this event called Reboot, and we get the live questions there. So we'll come away, we'll have 400 young people in the room, and we'll come away with 1,000 questions. And they'll all upvote the questions, so you can tell which ones are the most asked. So and once you've done a few events, it's a relatively scientific bit of evidence, actually. And they are still things like suicide. Right. Absolutely massive. Still some of the ones that we've been talking about for a long time, like abortion. Obviously, just recently we've had debates about assisted suicide in this country.
For those who don't know, there was just a big law passed. Now assisted suicide now is the law of the land?
No, it's just gone through the penultimate stage. Okay. So it needs it's got one more stage. Okay. But basically, lights are green and the chance are
it was very disappointing to see. But yeah, for sure. So suicide. assisted suicide. Yeah,
and that question of what is the value of human life,
sure.
and are we defined by our abilities? Once life isn't very fun anymore, does it stop being valuable?
Sure. Where's that Malgo Day fit in that for sure?
And I think particularly when we do see the rates of mental health, so anxiety is one of the most, amongst teenagers, one of the biggest issues. We're most likely to have people asking questions. If we put on a seminar about anxiety, just a recent event that we held in a town here called Reading, I remember I was doing prayer ministry afterwards, and one of the young people a young girl, probably about 15, 16, just came and she was shaking. Mm-hmm. And, we don't offer the full-on pastoral care, but sort of, what's going on? How can I pray for you? And she said, I'm just so worried. And I said, is there something particular? She says, no.
Wow.
I'm just so worried.
There's a book in the States, The Anxious Generation.
Yes,
so, yeah.
And it's true. Yeah. I mean, we know it from the science, and we know it from the research, and we know it anecdotally. And many of us will know friends in our young people in our
I got 3 daughters.
families.
I mean, I've met their friends, them themselves. They walk through it. Listen, I want to invite our callers, because my guess is that you listeners are having conversations with people and they have questions. And this is what Charlie does. He literally. I mean, I love that you upvote live. You get to.
Yes,
I want my questions texted in, and somebody to pick the easy ones for me, but not for you guys. So again, as you're trying to share the faith, maybe you're engaging with your kids or your neighbors or whatever it may be. Charlie's here to help answer some of those questions as well. We're going to talk more about the ACA, the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics as well. 877-548-3675 is our number. 877-548-3675. You call me your questions, or maybe even how you're trying to share the faith, be an apologist of sorts. Now, again, this is very basic, but people don't want to apologize for the faith. They want to be unashamed of their faith. And the word apologist is confusing to some people.
It is. That. One of my best friends is a complete atheist, and every time he sees me, he's like, how's the apologizing going? Has anyone accepted your apology yet? And partly it's a linguistic thing, and I think none of us would probably choose the word if we could.
Right.
But
Not today, yeah. For sure.
It's how do you respond?
Right.
I think it's that. It's what answer do you give? And it goes all the way back to the Bible, so you really shouldn't change things in the Bible.
Well, I would say even people like I'm a real believer in the Oxford comma, right? I think I'm an apologist. People would say you're an apologist for the Oxford comma. So people use the word in other places, but it's still strange. So where's it come from?
So there's a few places, but the key place that everybody goes back to is 1 Peter 3. And 1 Peter 3, you have a church who are scattered. They are being oppressed, persecuted, and some of them are being brought up on trial. And Peter urges them. He says, do not fear their threats. Set apart Christ as Lord in your hearts, and always be prepared to give an answer to anyone who asks you, to give a reason for the hope that you have. And that word answer is, you imagine somebody, they're on trial, and somebody says, why do you believe? Why will you not surrender this Jesus? Why will you not acknowledge that Caesar is Lord rather than Jesus Christ? And these are people who were, at the threat of death, and they're being told, be ready to give an answer. And I think it is a universal command that every Christian needs to be able to explain. And you might have had it from a child. If you've been fortunate enough to bring up children, I'm sure they went through that stage where they just ask, why? Mm-hmm. Why? And at some point you just go, because it just is.
Exactly. But just repent and believe.
But there are reasons.
Yeah.
And we all do have our reasons, and some of us it's been a real journey of logic, being slowly convinced step by step of different things. And, we would say our Oxford heritage goes back to someone like C.S. Lewis, who turns up an atheist, then becomes a theist, so believes in some sort of God, and then becomes convinced about the Christian God. And then even as he's convinced, he then has to make the choice to give his life, to actually surrender, and he calls himself the most reluctant convert. But other of us have actually, what's happened is that there's been a particular moment, and maybe somebody's come alongside and taught us something, or maybe that we've met God in a particular experiential way. So apologetics isn't just necessarily the rational evidential argument. Sometimes it is the argument from experience. And I think in a world where people are lost and without hope, if you can say, this is the difference that it makes to me. Somebody says, why are you a Christian? Well, actually, I'm a Christian because God loves me. That's good. Or you think the classic lovely song, Jesus loves me, this I know, for the Bible tells me so. That is profound theology, even though I think I learnt that song when I was about 18 months old. Wow. My grandfather was an evangelist. worked with Billy Graham on the Crusades and that sort of thing.
Oh,
and,
I know who your grandfather was.
And,
I know who your grandfather was.
and just an amazing thing.
It's
really.
it's pretty. You got a powerful heritage and history. I come from an unchristian family, so I look at that and I'm so thankful for folks who have that Christian heritage. And your grandfather, he's got some of his papers over at the Billy Graham Center at Wheaton College. So that's so. So then let's actually let's talk through a couple of things. Then we'll take calls and and talk about how you navigate certain things as well. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities today? I mean, at least for religion in America. Now we use the word religion in America. I'm using more of a scholarly term because I'm a follower of Jesus. I want people to be born again. But religion in America right now it was declining 1% per year, Christianity, and then the last 4 or 5 years hit it like a meteor hit a satellite, and it's just going 10 ways. We don't really know. So I'm actually launching a road tour. I'm going to be literally in a Sprinter van going from city to city doing the State of the Church tour, talking about what we're learning because people want to figure it out. But it's confusing at multiple levels. But we see challenges and opportunities both before us. What do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities? Before you answer that, let me invite people again to call 877-548-3675. Again, that's 877-548-3675. Maybe you got questions about how to share your faith. Maybe you got questions about, what are some of the hard questions? How do you navigate through some of those hard questions? Whatever those may be. Again, our number, want to hear from you, is 877-548-3675. 877-548-3675. So challenges and opportunities.
I think I mentioned one of the opportunities, which is ignorance is actually a real opportunity. If people don't know something, they haven't been inoculated against it. Most of us have curiosity about things that we don't know about. And particularly if you meet a Christian, instead of sort of people now assuming they know what you believe, they're more likely to be interested. Like that you might be the first sort of living, breathing, practicing Christian that somebody has known. And that would increasingly be the case when, again, depending exactly how you measure it, but something like 3 to 5% of the UK population go regularly to church. No. So that's a huge proportion of people who don't go to church and probably have never really gone to church. I think one of the big challenges I would highlight, is the increasing polarization of society as a whole, and where that is in politics. And for us, the big polarizing debate was Brexit, and it was quite a few years ago now, but it was the first time, at least in recent history, where it wasn't just sort of, let's not talk about politics, we'll disagree, but families were like properly falling out over a political
I know this is going to hurt your feelings, but not all Americans follow British politics. So it's when the UK left the European Union and became, I don't know, I'd say your own country, but your countries, that's all complicated. And that was a big thing. Like it was, you're now out, and when I travel to Ireland, I got to use my passport again and everything else. So but that split families.
It did split families, and I think it didn't just split families because of the issues, because issues are always hard. I think it was the very nature of debate. So we're having this conversation of, do we want to be more part of Europe or do we less part of Europe? And, you can come down different sides. And again, for me, on that, there isn't a Christian right answer or wrong answer. But it showed that we're not very good at critical thinking, at listening to people that we disagree with, at being compassionate and really trying to get under the skin of where other people are coming from. And I think it's a real challenge then if we are trying to talk about faith. If we're trying to say, well, actually, I believe something different to you, if we're in a society that can't disagree well and engage well on different topics, then how are we going to have those conversations? And therefore, how can people change their mind if we are partisan and we dig in? Now, I'm absolutely looking at American politics from, across a large bit of water, but I think this is the case in other places too. And I think if we've got a challenge of, okay, there are fundamental things that Christians disagree with. People, if you believe in God, you're going to believe certain things that disagree with somebody who doesn't believe in God. If you're in a society that can't have really good conversations, is not used to critical thinking and engaging and listening, that's going to make it really hard. But there is also, I think, a flip side opportunity there, which is if you say we live in a society where every debate is rancorous and angry, well, what an opportunity for Christians actually to be full of compassion and love, really committed to listen and understand people, even people that they find themselves disagreeing with quite vehemently. And that doesn't mean, and then also I think it doesn't mean not giving your own point of view, but saying, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to try and understand where you come from, and whether that's because of your social background or your national background, or because of the different assumptions that you've got about the world. If I can really listen and pay attention to you and what's going on for you, and then as I seek to therefore explain my point of view, I can do it in a way that relates and connects with the sort of things you care about. And so you see that happen, for instance, in this country on the transgender issue massively, where it's drawn these battle lines, but it doesn't always need to. It's how much time do we really spend understanding the experience of somebody and what life is like for somebody who is experiencing gender dysphoria and feels there's a mismatch between the body they're in and what they feel like. If we could spend some time, I'm not saying water down your opinion, but just spend that time really listening to earn the opportunity to speak and respond.
Going to continue our conversation with Charlie Stelzner. Your calls, our phone number is 877-548-3675. We're going to go right to the calls after the break. 877-548-3675. We'll be right back. And we are back, and I see the calls are starting to come in. We're going to have some good conversations with your calls. Our number is 877-548-3675. I'm going to say it slower because people say I'm a fast-talking New Yorker. It's true. Do I sound like a fast talker to you?
No, but I'm quite a fast talker myself.
Oh, are you okay?
I'm always told to slow down.
I'm the same thing all the time. And, I was I grew up in New York City. I was the interim pastor of a church in Tennessee. Wonderful traditional church, suit and tie. And they call me the fast-talking Yankee. That's what they called me the whole time. It was so funny.
Well, every time I'm told that my sermons are too long, I just think, speak faster.
Exactly.
Make them short.
877. See, I'm saying slow. 877-548-3675. Okay, so we're going to go to calls, and we're going to go to Tom. Tom, listen, Tom calls in from time to time. We like Tom, but they tell me you're like running out of battery on your phone. Tom, why is your phone not charged Saturday morning so you can call into the show? We'd like your calls.
Well, thank you for that. And the phone is defective. It's not the battery's fault. It's the phone itself. And I'm getting a new one Monday. For free.
We don't want to have to ship you. We don't want to have to ship you one from Moody Radio, but that's all right. But anyway, jump right into your question, Tom. I don't want you to run out of battery.
Okay. Well, thank you. And I also want to tell you that the university in Cleveland is still going strong. You usually ask about that when I call in.
I do. Lee University doing good work. Church of God, Cleveland, Tennessee University doing good work.
Yeah, well, my question is, when I was converted in 1971, there was a popular apologetic method was to refer people usually to the Gospel of John and say, if you want to know if God exists, he says in John 7, maybe verse 17 or something, if you're willing to do God's will, you will know if Jesus' teaching is true or not. And, faith comes by hearing by the word of God, that kind of thing. That was emphasized. So that's what I did. I sat down and read Matthew. And about the time I finished it, I thought, wow, this stuff is true. And I was doing okay until a guy came to the church that was a traveling apologist who wasn't one of the best trained in the world. And he said, oh, no, you can't do it that way. You got to learn all these logical arguments and stuff. So for years, I even got a master's degree, major in apologetics. And
you never told me that. Where'd you get your master's degree in apologetics?
That's confidential information. Yeah. Harding graduate.
Oh, sure. Okay. Yeah. Harding
Tennessee.
people are good people. So you're in the Restoration movement, maybe, and okay, fair enough. Okay, fascinating. Okay, but sorry I interrupted you. So you went and got a master's degree in apologetics. But go ahead and get to your question so I can have Charlie weigh in.
Okay, so I would find answers to objections, but sooner or later the devil would bring up a new one, and I'd wrestle through that. But then I went back to putting more faith in the Word of God and it being what the Lord used for 2,000 years. So I was just wondering, what does your guest think of that method of referring people to the Bible, as and just want his opinion on it.
Yeah, good. And let me just say, Tom, thank you for your call, Tom. But Tom's been holding out on me. He gives these calls, and he's always got this thoughtful question. Now I find out he's got a master's degree in apologetics. So, Tom, you're always welcome to call. I hope your phone doesn't go out on it. But I think it is. I mean, it is a good question. Because there are kind of debates around how best to do this. So, what would your answer be?
Yeah, thanks. I was actually doing a lecture on this on our
Really?
online program 2 weeks ago.
Nice.
So it's
and by the way, if you go to edstetserlive.com, it's linked to all that stuff right there.
fantastic. I think I'd probably just start with two different parts of the answer, one of which would be theological. So theologically, it is the Lord who saves, and it is his Spirit at work that opens blind eyes. And so any talk that we have about apologetics, it needs to be given, I think, anytime we think about giving an answer, we're saying it's not our answer, it's not our cleverness, it's not our rhetoric that is going to save somebody. It is God who does that work. And if he wants to, he'll do what he did with Balaam, and he'll use a donkey. So he's the sovereign Lord, and we trust him. And I think, and to continue that, I think there are wonderful, and so many people, and I love organizations that just say, we want to give out the scriptures, we want to give people a gospel, we want to put a Bible in a hotel room. And there is a truth. Jesus says, my sheep know my voice. But I think there's the other half of the answer is a tactical point. How do you even get someone to open a Bible? How do you get someone to engage with the scriptures? How do you help them even understand what they're reading? And so you have Philip, who's told to go and wait somewhere, and along comes this Ethiopian eunuch, and he's reading the scriptures, and Philip runs alongside and says, do you understand what you're reading? And this politician of some sort says, how can I unless someone explains it to me? And so I think what we're doing in apologetics is we're trying to help people come and investigate and understand. And God, in his grace, he uses people, he uses us as means to help people on that journey. And one of them might be that you say, actually, let me take you to a particular verse. I think for me, some of the tactics I would more use in that, and I don't mean tactics as tricks, I just mean, how I would relate to a person, might depend on the context. Actually, if they've come along to an event where I'm speaking and it's in a church, there's probably a Bible on a chair somewhere, and they know they're coming into a Christian setting. So maybe I might want to say, let me take you to this verse. Far more normally in conversation, I think that is the command in 1 Peter is to all Christians, is you just bring the Bible that means so much to you into the conversation, because you want to point this person to where they can get help. And so I would say something like, that's a really interesting question about trust and about vulnerability. Well, there was one woman that Jesus met who had real trust issues, and Jesus actually met her at a well, and he reached out to her and he actually asked her for something. He said, "Can I have some water?" And for me, that and you could talk about how that reaching out of Jesus is something to build trust, and that Jesus comes alongside us wherever we are. But I wouldn't necessarily say, look, let's sit down, let's open John's Gospel and read it, because that might be a bit weird socially. And so that's what I mean by theologically. Would it be wonderful if everyone just sat and read the Bible? But we do actually need people to help us. And one of the big things that people don't even want to open the Bible or turn up at church because they think it's irrelevant, or they think that it's wicked. They think that the Bible or the church has got nothing to say. There was a recent survey in the UK that asked people, if you had a big question, if you had a moral or pastoral issue in your life, where would you go? And pastors or the church came something like 7th. Internet was number 1. Parents and friends sort of came further up the list. But the sort of past church was something like number 7 of the place people are going to go.
What a change in the world in just like 50 years. I mean, it's crazy.
Isn't it?
Wow. Well, Tom, super question as always. And I'm kind of read the Gospel of John. I would tell them, if you got questions, read the Gospel of John. But I want to interact with them. We'll say, let's get together to talk about what the questions. So it's not just, again, I'm not against Bible distribution, but even the Gideons are like the kings of Bible distribution. They're focusing on Bible engagement. They want to say, how do we get people actually engaging the Bible? And that's going to be more of that one-on-one apologetic conversation or evangelistic conversation. So super. Let me tell you one more time the phone number, and then we're going to go with the callers that we have, because we have several in line. Last chance for you to get in line, 877 877-548-3675. That's 877-548-3675. Let's see. I think we can go to Sergio next. Sergio, you're in California. Welcome to our conversation with Charlie Stiles at the ACA, the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics.
Hey, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we please.
Hello.
Yes, go right ahead, Sergio.
All right, great. Yeah. So it's kind of twofold, but I'm going to make it short, hopefully. So I'm a part of a young adult group, and I help kind of oversee it a little bit, and kind of heading up this portion that is twofold. One, we want to do more outreach, and the young people are excited, very energetic, very passionate, and I think I'm trying to figure out a way how to balance doing that outreach, and I just want to really know your advice as to how to start or maybe where to go. And I have a lot of ideas and a lot of vision, but I just want some direction on how to equip them, and then how to maybe start, frameworking these events or these functions or these outreaches, whatever you want to call them.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't know.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
we're going to have Charlie weigh in just a second. If you'll hang on the line, you'll hear his answer as well. I did say I was going to take a couple more calls, so I'm going to do that right on the other side. 877-548-3675. In just a moment, we're going to have you answer his question. But I love that question, too. And stay on the line, too, because we might come back to you and ask a follow-up. We're going to continue our conversation with Charlie Stiles of the ACA in just a minute. All right, hey, we're back. One more segment here. Sergio just gave us a good question before the break. He's got young adults, got college group, needs advice on how to begin equipping this group. And you have some of the best resources. So I want to ask you, you could say other people's as well, but please do mention the ACA resources as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Was one of the things that we found, and I joined OCA about 3 years ago, and we were looking out there, and we're saying one of the things, you type in a question and it finds stuff online, and some of the answers are amazing and some of them aren't. Mm-hmm. And so we've really thought about how do we curate that and find really good high quality resources and recommend them. So we started putting those on our website. And then where we think, even though there might be good answers, we think there are different ones or we'd like to respond ourselves. We started making things. So our YouTube channel is taking some of those top questions and seeking to give an intellectually credible response to those key questions.
With a British accent, so it sounds more intellectually
it's
credible.
Amazing.
It does. It just, you guys can read the phone book and you sound smarter than us. But
I know. You finish high school and you sound like you've got a PhD. It's amazing, especially when you go over the pond. And then we also have a 6-week course and a 10-week course that people can do with us.
And they do it online? I mean, this is available now, right?
Yeah, so there's one that you can just download and do yourself. There's one you can do with us, so that you actually get a chance to ask your questions direct to the team. And I think that's one thing I've always been thinking about. And I think some of the really good programs out there, it's not just here's some resources, it's here's some people to learn from.
Love that.
And then you get to their heart, you can ask your questions. And I think there's some great programs around the place.
Including, Tom went to one that I didn't know had apologetics program.
Go.
But I would also mention, too, that we see the same thing. Moody Radio is a ministry of Moody Bible Institute, and Moody Bible Institute I was just talking to the professor of apologetics at ETS, the Evangelical Theological Society, 2 weeks ago. We happen to have the largest apologetics program in the world at the Talbot School of Theology. There are good, solid places. You can cascade up. So you could do a 6-week thing that you're doing here. You can do, the different levels you can cascade. And a lot of resources that are free. And sometimes there's guided, and as you said, you're interacting with people helping you to learn as well.
Yeah, so I think particularly for Sergio, thinking about his group is to say, what will help these young people that God has given me to care for at this particular stage, and then where can I point them if they want to go further? I think that scriptures are clear. We all need to be ready to give an answer for the hope that we have, but some people are particularly called to this ministry. So we had somebody on a program that we had last year, and I was interviewing him as he came, and he said, well, I work in a homeless shelter, so he's helping people get off the streets, and he said, no, I'm here every evening and I'm spending time with people, but I want to share with them what I believe. And I don't know how to, I'm living out my faith, but I want to explain the reason. And I looked up how you do that, and the internet told me that was called apologetics. So I looked up apologetics training, and here I am.
Yeah.
And I'm always going, well, how can we almost go to people and say, look, you want to live out your faith. Wonderful. You want to explain it as you go along. You want to live for Jesus and speak for Jesus. And I think there's some great programs. And that doesn't, that it might be you just begin with a couple of videos or you create a group. I think as well, I'd say to Sergio, one of the things to do would absolutely be to say, what can we do in our group and what are the questions that we're facing? So I think as you look, it's wonderful you've got some young people that want to get out there and do things. What I would do is I would sit and I would almost do a kind of, what have we got? Maybe you do a sort of SWOT study, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, or you just go, what have we kind of got here that's really good in this team? We've got fire, we've got passion, we've got some imagination. There's a great organisation in Europe called Steiger, and they do amazing street evangelism, really creative things. So Halloween, they're thinking, well, we don't really want to celebrate Halloween, but everyone is. So how can we use this as an opportunity for Jesus? Mm-hmm. So they have 2 pumpkins on a table in the middle of a town square. One of them has got a pile of Bible verses in it. The other has got a candle, and there's a little fire in it. And they have a big sign saying, take one, leave one. And you come up with you're given a bit of paper, and you write something that is in your life you want to get rid of. And you write it on it, and you put it into the little fire. Wow. And then you take a Bible verse. And they say it's non-cringe, it's a really just easy idea of just interacting with people. And they say they just pray so hard in advance that God will give them the right Bible verse to the right people. But they say also people just kind of gather around or follow them on social media and they just get looped in. So I think that's great. And then the other side I would say to Sergio is it would be worth doing, and we don't do this in a way that takes the wind out of the sails, kind of demoralize your group, but actually say, what are the main barriers? So one of the things that we have found as we've done research in this country is that fear of what if I'm asked a question I can't answer stops people from even saying the first thing. So you go out there and you go, oh, can I tell you about Jesus, or do you believe anything about God, or you say take one, leave one, and then someone tells me, yes, but what about my grandma who died horribly? And you're thinking, wouldn't know what to say there. Therefore, I don't even want to admit I'm a Christian in the workplace or on the streets or on social media, because what if people come up? And so, what I would do is I would say, okay, Sergio, to sit down with your group, say, what have we got here that's really good? What are the ideas, the passion, the heart? And what might be the barriers? And then think about trying to source some training that will particularly help limit or reduce the barriers so that people can go out with full confidence, ready to connect with people.
Love it. Okay, we've got a few callers.
All right, I'll go quicker.
And you're going to have to go quicker. And the callers are going to have to be brief. So, Alex, I'm going to come to you next, and then I think I'm going to go to Raj and Jim, and try to get Frank all in. But I need you to go right to the point and right to your question, okay? So, Alex, you're up first in Cincinnati. Go right ahead.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Appreciate the take. You said parents and friends, and then they go to Messenger, and then they go to the university class, and they go to this Baptist Student Union, and I'm a part of none of those. So where would I go to get? I like your take one, give one, because I've gone to the Student Union cafeteria and I've put up a little sign, and I've done outside there with a little whiteboard, and so I challenge them to approach me, but approaching them is a bit, it scares them off. And so I appreciate your
little harder.
I like the idea.
Okay, so give me, Alex, I'm not quite sure I get your question, though, but what's your question?
Where's the next place to go? Friends and family, and talk, TikTok, and message. Cafeteria, table.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Where do you go next?
To reach people.
Yeah.
I think you've got to say, okay, where has God put me? Where's the mission field he's given me? Is it my workplace? Is it the street where I work? Is it my neighbours? Is it the shops that I always go to? And I don't mean this as just a simple ask, but pray, say, God, would you open a door for your message? Lord, I want to share. I want to do it coming from the overflow of the heart. I want the opportunity. Lord, where is it? And one of the big things I would do is work out a way of almost putting up a flag, or putting up some sort of signal to say, I'm open. Whether it is you work at a cubicle and you just get a little postcard with a little sign that just says, God loves our questions, and you just leave it there, and you see if anyone ever does it. Or we actually had some umbrellas that we used to take on missions, and obviously it rains a lot in the UK, and these umbrellas would have different questions around the outside. And people go, where'd the umbrella from? Or no, that question about suffering, that's the question I always ask. And they would just start a conversation. So are there things that you can do that just put out there, say, I'm up for this conversation, and then pray that God would bring somebody with that question?
Love that. Okay, Raj, we're going to try to get you in, but you got to be super quick. Raj, you're live on the air. Go right ahead.
Great. The question is how to best communicate our faith with others strategically and tactically. For example, Jesus told parables, so there's the art of storytelling. What do you suggest we would do in general?
I have the best callers. Raj, thank you for
That's
your call.
a great
And then
question.
these are amazing people. Okay, but you got to answer. And you got about a minute.
Thanks. I've got a minute. It's ridiculous. So
We call it a New York minute, too. Go ahead.
Some of it is, what has God gifted you with? Or given you maybe the beginnings of a gift. Maybe it's not fully formed yet, but maybe you love writing poems, or maybe you like making social media reels, or maybe you are an artist, or maybe you're a graphic designer, or just think, what has God given me as an opportunity? So if you're not a storyteller in any way and you're just terrible at that, it probably isn't the thing you're being called to do, but you might be asked to make a poster. It might be that you've given the gift of hospitality, and therefore the call on your life is to think through and pray through and strategically say, how can I welcome people into my life? And so you'll notice that Jesus didn't have a house, but he was invited into other people's homes, and that was often where he did a lot of his teaching. So maybe it could be that you're not the person who's great at speaking, but you're great at hosting something, so you can get somebody in. So I would sit down with a friend, with a pastor, and say, can you help me work out what's my calling? What has God given me? And then I would ask, Lord, how can you use this? Whether I'm an accountant, whether I'm a graphic designer, whatever I am.
So good, so good. Charlie Stiles, this has been great fun right here at ACA, the Oxford Center for Christian Apologetics, in your brand new offices. Your website is available at our site, edstetzerlive.com. Want people to go there as well. And we're doing some things together that we'll be sharing with folks
I'm
later
really excited
on,
about that.
months from now, but we're doing some exciting things about this as well. Hey, thanks everyone for your calls. Great callers today. Thanks to our team working behind the scenes. My producer, Karen Hendren, my engineers, Merle St. James and Omar Mendoza, and Tiara working the phones. Thank you so much. Great callers today as well. To hear today's program again, go to edstetzerlive.com or on the Moody Radio app. You can connect with us through social media. All of them are at Ed Stetzer Live. And Ed Stetzer Live is a production of Moody Radio, which is a ministry of Moody Bible Institute. From Oxford, I say thanks and God bless. We'll see you next week.